basketball. This is March Madness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the women's edition of Flop Warning Wear. Actually, hold on. I got to get some. Just a second, guys. Where in this episode, we go cycling through our superlatives of last season of women's college basketball. I am joined by my good teammates and Elias Corey and Luke Donovan with Jack Linder, our wonderful producer. The green flag is a go, folks. It's time to mount our little 5 bicycles and get into our first segment of the pod. But before we do that, was it good?
Scripting yourself an outfit change is wild.
I like the helmet, though. You should leave it on the whole time.
Reaching for the helmet.
Am I doing it? I don't have headphones on, but we'll do it. We'll do it.
Reaching for the helmet would have been fine, but writing into the script that you need to change into the helmet
sometimes
seems like an odd move. And now you've got hat, helmet, and headphones.
Does it work? That works. Okay. For those
I mean,
of
you
you
look
who
ridiculous.
it's fine. I usually do anyway. For those of you who
Facts.
have no idea what the heck is going on and why I'm wearing a bicycle helmet, it is Little 5 week here in this week at Indiana University. So we just want to give a quick shout out to all of those riding, all of the media students here in the media school covering the Little 500 races. So that is why I'm wearing a ridiculous bicycle helmet on my head, but it's coming right off because it is so uncomfortable and I'm not going to do that. But anyways, good luck to all those riding in Little 5 and covering it as well. Should be a fun weekend. Stay safe and don't get into any trouble. But now we're going to talk about college basketball, which is why we are all here. We're going to get into maybe a little bit of a season recap, just general thoughts. I just want your maybe general takeaways, anything that stood out. Obviously, Caitlin Clark storylines, South Carolina going undefeated all the entire year. Luke, I'll go ahead and start with you. Just how was this season for you as a viewer of women's college basketball?
I loved it. I think it was probably one of the best seasons of all time for women's college basketball. I mean, shout out to South Carolina and Camila Cordoso and Dawn Staley and all them. Undefeated national championships, not much more you can ask for there. I mean, that's how you take care of business. I think it's really hard when you're 30-0 and you can't lose anymore and you have to win, and they got the job done. They beat a lot of good teams, and shout out to them.
Yeah, it's always – I think I mentioned it on maybe a past podcast episode that, we've seen some undefeated seasons in women's college basketball, particularly with UConn and their dynasty that they had a few years back. But anytime that actually happens, I mean, you still have to give kudos, no matter how common it may be in women's college basketball in a few seasons that it's already happened. But, I mean, that is no easy feat to go the entire season not losing games. So, Elias, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess generally I think, what a cool time in history we are in terms of women's basketball, guys. I mean, because, Caitlin Clark has really put the sport, in this big spotlight during her time in Iowa. But now she gets to do the same thing in the WNBA, and she's accompanied by other stars, like Cameron Brink, like Angel Reese, like Camila Cardoso, who are now just going to be putting so many more eyes on the WNBA, and they're leaving behind so many other superstars in the women's college basketball game that they've done so much to cultivate and lift up these last few years that they've been in school. I mean, you're leaving behind Hannah Hidalgo, Juju Watkins, Paige Beckers, like Ozzie Fudd. You're leaving behind some really stellar players that are going to be able to continue to just grow the sport and really just continue to make women's college basketball and women's basketball as a whole more, better appreciated. Better appreciated. So I think, we're going to look back at these last few years in 50 years and say this is when women's college basketball and the WNBA really took off.
Yeah. I mean, the excitement doesn't leave, especially with all those young stars. I mean, Juju Watkins did what she did this year, and she's only a freshman. So
is it weird to say USC is the best team in the Big Ten?
Ugh. I don't like that. I don't like that. That's still an adjustment period.
I don't know if it's weird. It's incorrect.
Oh. So
who's got? Better then?
I'm going completely off script. Let's do it, Elias. Go ahead.
You're just never going to get me to say that's not true. You're not never going to get me to say that somebody's better than IU.
USC will
That's
be
fair.
the best team in the Big Ten for
I think-
women's college basketball next year.
I think Terry Morin can coach any team to Big Ten contention, no matter who's in the Big Ten.
Don't forget about Ohio State though. Cody McMahon coming back.
It's true.
But they lose a couple players, Taylor and Sheldon.
Yeah.
Juju Watkins is just another year older.
I
They
think-
bring in a top recruiting class.
I think it's up in the air right now. USC, I feel like top 3 right now in my mind would be USC, Indiana, Ohio State. But
Yeah,
to rank them,
yeah.
I don't know where.
Sure.
That's,
So,
that's fair.
Luke, I guess my question would be, did you have the Kansas men's team winning the national championship this year?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay.
What does that have to do? I'm sorry.
Because they had a stellar roster heading into this season. They
Their
brought
bench was so atrocious. I could have been on a bench player for the
in. Sure, but
Jayhawks.
would we have expected their bench to be atrocious heading into the season?
Yes.
Because I don't think so.
Yes. Nick Timberlake can't be your best bench player.
Nick Timberlake was one of the most coveted recruits coming into the season. I will
That's
not
fair.
hear Nick Timberlake slander. But my point is, there's a lot of unpredictability in college basketball. And while, yes, USC probably looks the most polished, as they begin their Big Ten endeavors, I think it'd be foolish to count out the Terry Morin-led Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah,
And, of course,
well,
Ohio State.
Terry Morin had a player go into the WNBA draft, excuse me, a few nights ago, which is what our first segment is going to be on. So, general takeaways, obviously, no surprise, Caitlin Clark goes number 1 to the Indiana Fever. But what stood out to me was kind of like the interviews after that. She just completely said, like, oh, Indiana has been a state that's hated me for a few years, and now I have to go play pro ball. Just, I mean, it's a completely different, like flipping the script to where
Mhm.
now, you have Indiana fans who are probably have maybe, most of them have some connection to Indiana University. I've seen her play in Assembly Hall possibly, and, to be quite blunt, hated her guts because she would do Caitlin Clark things, but now they have to kind of switch over. But Caitlin Clark to number 1, I think that's the biggest thing. We don't really have to discuss anything about that because we all knew that was going to happen. But the main thing that caught my eye was Camila Cardoso and Angel Reese are actually teaming up on the Chicago Sky. Just any general reactions to that, Elias? I'll go to you.
I think it's hilarious. I
do
mean,
too.
these are two
It
players
is
that have
hilarious.
just really gone at it, especially this season. I mean, SEC rivals, two of the best power forward, or not power forwards, two of the best in the front court,
There you go.
and on the court this year for any team in the nation. And so getting to see them team up in the pros is going to be really cool. I'm curious to see how the lineup sort of shakes out, if Cardozo is going to run the 5 and Reese is going to run the 4. Even though Reese has struggled to shoot it from beyond the arc, or if they're going to do a little bit of a 1-2 punch where, maybe Reese or Cardozo comes off the bench. Just going to be really cool to see them write a new story in their career on the same team. That's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and you talk about the battles that they had during the season where, they were getting in each other's face, but that can happen. I mean, when you face each other in a high intensity situation, then you go to pro ball and now all of a sudden you're teammates and, kind of have to flip the script. I would imagine that they don't have any trouble doing that.
Yes.
Obviously just being teammates now, but
They compete. I think it's great. I think, it shows how much they care, and now that they can do it for the same team. So I think it's all respect between those two, and I'm excited to see what they do for the Sky.
Absolutely. And Luke, going right back to you, I think you wrote this down. You had a team that won the night. Go ahead and give it to us.
Yeah, I think the Sparks won the night. They got Cameron Brink, great rim protector, Stanford number 2, and then they still get the best wing in the class with Rickea Jackson from Tennessee, and then they pick up Juju Watkins' former counterpart Mackenzie Forbes late. I don't know if she'll make the roster, but she can play ball, and I think Cameron Brink and Rickea Jackson for the Sparks, that brings some hype to LA. I think those two combined, that's a good starting 5 with 3 other players. Those two, I think, are going to be difference makers. Both of them could be the best player in the class if Caitlin Clark wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
certainly when you get that kind of high leverage name in Cameron Brink, and then you, like you said, you add the best wing in the draft with Rickea Jackson, again, bringing more attention to the women's basketball space, but especially in LA, where you already have the Lakers, which is one of the more popular teams in the NBA.
Absolutely.
Just bringing more talent and more kind of star power in towards that city is going to do wonders for the sport.
Yeah.
So,
Luke, I'm glad you wanted to highlight the Sparks performance on draft night because, I think there's something really, Cameron Brink is in a really cool position where any other year, she is the slam dunk #1 overall pick. Everybody's excited to get Cameron Brink on their team. It just so happens that probably the best women's college basketball player we've ever seen is in her same draft class. So the LA Sparks got a great one. They're not going to be disappointed about ending up with Cameron Brink at all. And then just add on top of that you get, like you guys have said, Rickea Jackson, best wing in the class, and Mackenzie Forms, who knows what it's like to win at USC. The Sparks, they really took care of business on draft night. And Cameron Brink is now in a spot where the expectations are on Clark. All the eyes, as far as rookie of the year, those are going to be on on Caitlin Clark. As far as like first one to make an all-star game, going to be on Caitlin Clark. Cameron Brink gets to just silently be one of the best players
absolutely
in the WNBA, I think. I mean, stepping on the court, she's going to be one of the most exciting prospects in the league going into this season.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up. And kind of adding on to that, Paige Beckers also had the chance to be in this draft class, and she opted not to be in it. That would have been probably the best draft class in history for, years to come, and definitely one in the past. But we'll go ahead and move into our next segment, which we did on our Monday show, the season superlatives, which we just kind of go over, a general outlook on the season, kind of give our picks to some, I guess, awards, but some of them aren't really awards. You don't really want to have these. But some teams, they'll take any recognition. So I'm going to go to Luke in our first kind of senior superlative. Not senior, season. I'm sorry. Not everyone is seniors. Season superlative. Luke, I'll go ahead and go to you first for your upset of the year pick. And you got a good one.
We keep talking about Caitlin Clark, so let's talk about that Nebraska game, 82-79. Nebraska able to pull it out with the dominant fourth quarter where they outscored the Hawkeyes 27-10. It looked like it was all but over going into the fourth quarter, and then they started the double team of Caitlin Clark, the box and one, just clamped down, hit some shots, and I think that was one of the most exciting games this year, surprisingly. Even though there was some big leads for Iowa throughout the game, that fourth quarter was just so fun to watch. Caitlin Clark still had 31 points, but Jazz Shelley had 23, and I think that game was a real turning point for Iowa because after that they kind of balled out until the obviously the national championship. But I think it was a turning point for Iowa and made Caitlin Clark refocus herself, I think, and really lock in for the final stretch down the year.
Yeah, and it's important that you say kind of took the turn because that was actually getting into the late weeks of the season, and that was a very important loss, and they would have to win out to kind of contend for that Big Ten title, and they didn't get it to wrap up the season. Ohio State would win it, but that was a very important loss, and like you said, they made the adjustments they needed to make, finished out the season pretty well, and heck, got to the national championship. So, I definitely agree with you. That was, a key turning point for their season. I'm going to go ahead and go with my upset of the year, and I have to go with not necessarily a team that, it was like a really big upset, but it was an upset definitely in tournament time. I'm going to take the NC State Wolfpack over Texas in the Elite 8 round because I talked about this on a earlier episode. NC State was flying under the radar the entire year, and especially in tournament time. No one was really paying attention to them. I think a lot of people had Texas coming out of that region, and then NC State comes in the Elite 8 and beats Texas by 10. So a good game for them. It was I apologize. I think I said this name wrong last time, but I think it's Asia James for NC State, 27 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists on that game. A very good game. That's been their leading scorer the entire year. And on Texas, Texas side, Madison Booker, only 17 points. She can definitely do more than that on any given day. So they just didn't have it in that game, and NC State ultimately would move on to the Final Four and didn't really give South Carolina a run for their money in that matchup. But ultimately, I think that was a really key turning point in the tournament. I think, again, like Texas had the popular vote coming out of that region, but NC State shocked the world and beat them by 10. So.
They just destroyed Texas on the perimeter.
Yeah.
I mean, defensively and offensively, I think the Wolfpack shot 50% from behind the arc, and Texas was like under 20. So I think, yeah, I mean, the Wolfpack had a great tournament run. Obviously, when you run into a team like South Carolina, it gets a little bit more difficult than every other game. But I mean, certainly a Final Four for the Wolfpack can't be disappointed at all.
Elias, you got one?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Indiana in their first game of the Big Ten tournament, first and only because they suffered a really tough loss to the 6th seed Michigan Wolverines, who, you know, I mean, had an okay season, right? Above 500 in the Big Ten is always going to be tough to do, but Indiana was coming off, you know, a really big win against Iowa, a huge win, 20-point win on the road at Northwestern, and then a pretty big win over Maryland at home to end off their regular season. But obviously Maryland wasn't special this year, and you just can't follow that up with a 13-point loss to a Michigan team that really should have no business beating Indiana in a Big Ten tournament with as good as that roster was constructed heading into that game.
That was a really bad loss for the Hoosiers because it made them the 4 seed in the same region as South Carolina.
Yep.
And they almost beat South Carolina
Almost.
too.
My
so
goodness.
imagine if they win that game, they avoid South Carolina's bracket. They could have been an Elite Eight Final Four team.
Yeah.
They were good enough to compete with just about anybody. And they showed that in the tournament against South Carolina. But if they beat Michigan and maybe make a run in the Big Ten tournament and avoid South Carolina, they could have gotten a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it just goes to show how important Mackenzie Holmes was for that team, because I don't believe she was 100% healthy during that Michigan game, and I think that had a lot to play in it. But either way, I mean, you construct a roster for a reason, and you have an advantage to make a run in that Big Ten tournament. When Mackenzie Holmes comes back, I think she was at that time maybe game day 2 or 3.
I think she only played for like 8 minutes
Yeah,
or so against
so-
Michigan.
Yeah, she wasn't going to play the entire game, but if you won that game and she could increase her minutes every day, then obviously you could have a chance to make a run. But ultimately, a pretty shocking loss, to say the least, for the Indiana Hoosiers. We're going to move on to our next season superlative. It is going to be our best home court environment of the year. Could be just a team in general, could be a specific game. I'm going to start out with mine because I was there as covering for our radio station here at Indiana, and I was able to stand courtside the entire game. And Indiana at home versus Iowa was electric. I think that was the best crowd Assembly Hall had that year, and that's women's and men's.
Yeah, I agree.
That crowd was amazing, and that was the more important thing. That was the one time I have really seen in person, I guess maybe on TV as well, but as one of the rare times I saw Caitlin Clark a little rattled. And like she said in her post draft interview, she didn't like playing in Indiana, and you could tell. You could tell. I mean, it was sold out, just an incredible atmosphere for just women's college basketball in general. And I think a lot of people were watching that game. And props to Assembly Hall, because if it weren't for the Iowa Hawkeyes and their host numbers, Assembly Hall had, I believe, the second most Big Ten attendance for the Big Ten. I don't know about their national rank, but the second most attendance in Big Ten. And Indiana just really supported their team the entire way. That game especially was a great environment. I think, it's a great opportunity that we have because we're so close to it and we can watch games very often. But Luke, I'll go to you. Looks like you have
I got a few.
you got a few.
It's kind of
Okay.
just the SEC in general.
Okay.
I think the SEC, when it comes to women's basketball, is a little bit different than every other conference. I mean, you got the Lady Volunteers are great with their fans. They've always had great fans. Shout out to them. And then you got a team like Auburn, who was pretty good this year. They had 10 losses, and only 3 of them were at home. 7 of them were on the road. I think that shows that they got a good home crowd going for them, because I think college basketball, you can really tell that there's home court advantage.
Yeah.
It's like one of the few sports where I think it makes a palpable difference.
Mhm.
And I think that showed. Mississippi State also has great fans out there, but the SEC in those games in that conference, those fans, they get after it for those games.
Elias, you're next.
I'm going to give you one particular moment.
Okay.
Indiana playing Purdue, approaching the back end of the regular season in the Big Ten. Mackenzie Holmes, just 18 points away from breaking Indiana's all-time scoring record. That I was at almost every women's home basketball game this year covering the team. When Mackenzie Holmes broke the scoring record against rival Purdue, that may be the loudest I've heard Assembly Hall since I got here. Absolutely insane. Cements herself as arguably the greatest to ever lace them up for IU, and just really cool to see how she's grown at IU since she got here 4 years ago now, and just a girl from a small town in Maine has put her name in the history books for one of the most historic basketball programs in the nation. And seeing the way the crowd really took to that moment was awesome.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I was in the crowd just as a fan that game, and I remember just standing up, and when she only had 2 points to break it, and I didn't sit down. I mean, it was hype. It was hype. Mackenzie Holmes, shout out if you somehow listen to this. But yeah, great atmosphere that game, and definitely one to remember for the Indiana Hoosiers.
Mackenzie Holmes is not going to hear our podcast.
Yeah, hey, you never know. If we get a clip and it finds some people, you never know. But
yeah, if all 3 of our fans would like to share this clip with Mackenzie Holmes, just know
just tag her 10 million times, and we might get it mentioned.
We as a group appreciate what you've done.
There you go.
For the city of Bloomington, for the state, gosh, for the nation. No.
Yeah. Hey, it would be rude not to. Just think about
Rude
think
not
about
to
it that way. Rude not to have a shout out. Just be like, yeah, Mackenzie Holmes, cool. You did good.
Well, now you've just ruined our chances.
It's a hypothetical situation, okay?
Mackenzie,
thank you.
Yeah, I apologize that Owen's diminishing your accomplishments. We're really
You
excited
can't
for
say this, because then people can chop it up and just say that.
Yes, all 2 of our fans, please do not crop this up. Mackenzie Holmes is going to do amazing things in Seattle. Congratulations to her for getting drafted. I really hope you go out there and prove Owen wrong.
You stink. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just gonna move on because I've just been painted under a bad light. But our biggest surprise team of the year, I'm gonna go ahead and start this one off. I'm gonna give it to the Duke Blue Devils, who had a very good year, made the tournament, flew under the radar just a lot of times. I believe they finished the season ranked number 17 in the AP poll. Went 22-12 against a finishing record, wins against NC State, Ohio State, and in different parts of the year. Just a solid year all around for them. Maybe not the program you think of when you think of Duke is the women's team, but they definitely proved to be, a program to be reckoned with, and one that needs to be paid more attention to. So those are my 2 cents, Luke.
Shout out to Duke for that win over Ohio State too.
Absolutely.
That was a big win.
Luke,
I got USC. I don't know how surprising it is. We knew they were going to be good, but I didn't think they were going to be this good, this quick. First year head coach, Juju Watkins, just a freshman. They had Mackenzie Forbes, who's now in the WNBA, but they were very good. They were very impressive. And I think, moving forward, the future is clear skies and bright and sunny there in Southern California for the Trojans. I think, they look really good. They seem to have it figured out, letting Juju Watkins be the star that she is. And, they were a 1 seed. I really didn't think coming into the year they were going to be a 1 seed. I mean, obviously they were going to make the tournament. I thought they would be more in that 3, 4, 5 range,
Yep.
but they proved everybody wrong, and Juju Watkins really showed off for them.
Yeah, and I am interested to see, just kind of going a little off tangent and looking to next year. I'm interested to see if there's any growing pains when they transition to the Big Ten. I mean, I think you'd have to pay attention to a little bit of that, but it's two different brands of basketball when you really think about it.
Yeah.
The Big Ten historically is a lot slower than maybe some other conferences, so maybe that could throw them off, or they could capitalize off that. So I'm just interested to see not just USC, but the other 3 teams transitioning into the Big Ten, if there's an adjustment period or if they continue to dominate. But yeah, I agree with you, Luke. I don't think I really had USC on my radar as good as they finished out the season to be, and number 1 seed good, but incredible year. Of course, Juju Watkins. I've said her name plenty of times in this podcast, and she really put that program on the map. Elias, you got a pick?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a huge surprise, but I think definitely a lot of people did not have Notre Dame being just as good as they were, and that's behind another person that we've mentioned maybe just once on this podcast, certainly not enough. So we'll talk about Hannah Hidalgo, because as a freshman, she was one of the best players in the country, not just on her team, not just in the ACC, in the country. And what's really indicative of that is like mainly her performances down the stretch. I mean, look at the ACC women's basketball tournament. They beat some really quality teams en route to a championship, beating a really solid Louisville team, and then 2 stellar teams in Virginia Tech and NC State who ended up being in the Final Four, and all behind, obviously it's a team game, but pretty much geared and, fueled by this freshman phenom, Hannah Hidalgo. And because of the way the NCAA women's basketball is structured, she's got a few more years with that team to continue to just light up the NCAA while she's in college.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame's another team that's going to be really good next year as well. They only really had 1 senior, Anna DeWolf, that contributed good minutes and points, but they also have a great recruit coming in Katarina Koval, the center for them. I think Notre Dame, they have a bright future as well, and I'm excited to see Hannah continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and flip the script, and with our next superlative, we'll go ahead and go to maybe the most disappointing team, or a team that just underperformed when the time and the light was on them. Luke, I will go ahead and go to you first. You have a Big Ten team.
Yeah, it's got to be Ohio State for me. I think we both said it before their matchup against Iowa. At Iowa, that Ohio State was going to be a Final Four team, that they were going to beat Iowa in Iowa, and none of that happened. They lost early in the Big Ten tournament to Maryland in an absolute blowout, 82-61. They get bounced in the second round of the tournament to Duke. I mean, I think for a team that had so much promise with all their players, all their talent, Celeste Taylor, Sheldon, McMahon, it's disappointing for the Buckeyes, and I think they got to get right in March next year to correct all their wrongs this year, because it was disappointing for a team that had a lot of promise.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar pick. Just one team that they had a lot of promise, and it kind of was a downhill roller coaster ride for them towards the later of the season. I mentioned their name a lot as well. Colorado. I mean, I really harped on them the entire year, and I hate to be overly critical, but they kind of deserved it. They lost 5 of their 6 in the regular season, the last 6 games of the regular season, after being highly ranked as second, I believe, second in the nation. You can't do that, especially in a conference with so many good programs. And they just failed to make a run in the conference in NCAAs. They made the Sweet 16, which, that's good. Obviously, if you make some sort of a run to the Sweet 16 in the NCAAs, but when you're trying to live up to that number 2 ranked hype, and you really, you have the program to do it, and you just don't, that's when it gets a little disappointing for me. They really could have been a very, very good team, and I think could have made a longer run if things would have went a different way. But just kind of more along Luke's side, just kind of didn't really have the juice, I guess, to really finish out the season well, and didn't really perform when it mattered. Elias, do you have a pick for your most disappointing team?
Well, I don't know if collectively as a team they were particularly disappointing, but I think it's fair to say that the nation was disappointed not to see Caitlin Clark raise a national championship trophy
That's
this
fair.
year. Yeah. Because like I said, and like so many people have said, Caitlin Clark, probably the best women's college basketball player of all time. I don't think there's a ton of debate out there about that. With some quality role pieces behind her, with Kate Martin, Molly Davis. It's a really good basketball. Hannah Stolke.
Yep.
Who I thought it was really funny. Angel Reese tweeted after getting knocked out of the tournament during an Iowa game. She just said, off topic, Hannah Stolke is really pretty. I don't know why. I thought it was funny that Angel Reese tweeted that. Angel Reese, that's the only compliment she's ever given out, actually. But yeah, I mean, as annoying as it was to be at IU when Caitlin Clark is over there in Iowa just lighting up college basketball, it is, it almost feels like we held in a sneeze.
It would have been the storybook ending.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for her to be sent into the league with, this just the biggest win of her career would have been so cool to see. And obviously they come up against a generational South Carolina team that goes undefeated. And I don't know. It's a really disappointing way to end the season. If you're Caitlin Clark, if you're a women's college basketball fan, all props to Dawn Staley in South Carolina for having such an incredible season. But it just feels like there was something left on the table, that this Iowa team could have been looked at as more than just Caitlin Clark, but could have been looked at as one of the great college basketball teams.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead with our last kind of award here, and maybe one that I'm kind of excited to give out, I guess, in my personal opinion, but the under the radar player for this year, maybe on a team that had a decent year or a good year, but a player that overperformed and then really did a lot for a team. I got to give my props to Deja Kelly, because I remember when North Carolina came to town maybe it was a few seasons ago, she, was already just a stud, to be quite fair. And she has continued to do so, even for a UNC team that, still made the tournament, but maybe not up to the expectation that they had preseason, because they've had they strung a few good years together, and things really looked at an uphill trajectory for the Tar Heels. But Deja Kelly did everything that she could. She's actually in the transfer portal now, which we may talk about a little bit. 16 a game, 3 boards, 3 assists, a steal. Talk about, just doing a lot for your team, trying to lead them as much as they can. Excuse me.
We're not just going to gloss over that.
Yeah. I mean,
sip your water.
Everybody,
I got to take
calm
water.
down. Owen's going to drink his Wawa.
Luke, I'll go ahead to you.
All right, I got Talia von Oelhoffen, Owen. Didn't think I could say it, unfortunately. Oregon State had a pretty good year. They finished 4th in the Pac-12. Obviously, Reagan Beers, who's in the transfer portal as well, is their star. But Talia made Oregon State who they were. Defensive team, point guard, does it all. 4 boards, 5 assists, 11 points a game. Really gave them an identity. They lost to South Carolina like so many other teams did this year in the Elite Eight. But I think she's a really good player. I'm excited to see her continue to grow. She's got more time left in the game. And with Reagan Beers in the transfer portal, she's going to have a great opportunity to step up next year in her senior season.
Absolutely. It's just a really good year for Oregon State in general. Those two definitely led the team, but it's going to be a new look with Reagan Beers hitting the portal. Elias, my good friend, I see who you have. Go ahead and tell us.
one of the most criminally underrated basketball players in the Big Ten for the entire season. I'm talking about Sarah Scalia, because when you play point guard in the same conference as Caitlin Clark, who's just making, threes from seemingly anywhere on the court, you're going to be overshadowed if you're a strictly three-point shooter. Sarah Scalia was, in my opinion, arguably a better three-point shooter than Clark for the year, because she only took shots she knew she could make, right? Caitlin Clark took a lot of shots because she's an excellent shooter, naturally is going to draw back her three-point percentage a little bit. Sarah Scalia picks her shots better than almost anybody that you're going to watch at any level of basketball. She shot 43% from three this year. That's insane. Her 90% from free throw, her worst mark since 2019 when she shot 82%. She's been above 90 every other year that she's been in college, and was really just one of the driving factors on a really successful Indiana team this year. And it's disappointing to me that she never really gets her flowers for, being as good as she was this year, because there weren't many players in the nation that you could be more sure of if they were shooting a three in rhythm than Sarah Scalia.
Yeah. And the thing about Scalia for me is just the improvement in the system of IU from the first year into now. It's just substantial, and she doesn't get enough of recognition for that. And I'll have plenty to talk about in actually my shot clock, which is directed towards Sarah Scalia, but I'll hold that for that segment. We're going to step away from the superlatives and now move on to the kind of current state of women's college basketball, and kind of go more towards, kind of the off-season period, as I like to call it. We'll start with the coaching carousel of college basketball right now for the women's side. And I think the biggest one for me, and one that we actually had a little bit of conversation downstairs in our classroom, was Tennessee, because they made the Sweet 16, had a very good year, and they still fired their head coach and Kelly Harper. Now, we don't know. There could have been some behind the scenes stuff that just didn't work out for them, and that's very possible. But the hire that they made was Kim Caldwell from Marshall, I believe, which it's a very respectable hire. She was the D1 Rookie of the Year head coach last year. Obviously, it's a big turning point for this program, because if you're a fan and you made the tournament and you really think like, okay, this coach knows what they're doing, but then you get they get fired, and then you bring in a head coach that obviously has some success, but definitely not at the highest level. It's a little worrying if I was in that situation, but the thing about Tennessee is they're a very historic program with a lot of history. And, I wouldn't have made that hire. I don't think I would have fired the head coach. It's one that still puzzles me to this day, just looking at it. But, they must know something or had some experience that we don't know.
I think there's been a narrative shift and a lack of satisfaction for making Sweet 16s in college basketball now. You have to make Final Fours. You have to win championships. Otherwise, you're not safe. And I think we've seen that both in the men's game and the women's game. And it's interesting to see, because I think it's just going to continue. More coaches are going to be moving around more frequently, and teams are going to be doing whatever they think is best, probably making too many moves to try and win a championship.
Yeah. And then, Luke, I'll go right back to you for a hire out of, I can't really say the Pac-12 because it's not really existing anymore, but for Stanford, the biggest story here is their head coach retiring.
Yeah, Tara Vanderveer retires after almost 4 decades with the Cardinal.
It's crazy.
38 years there. She's a great coach, and now she'll be replaced by someone who worked under her in Kate Pay, and it'll be a new era for Stanford. But nothing too crazy with this one. No firing or anything like that. Just Vanderveer had to retire, and Kate Pay, who has worked with Vanderveer, takes over. And I think that's obviously something of note, because you have a great coach who's no longer coaching.
Yeah, and that's kind of the traditional way of going about things. You have maybe a head coach that is with the program for a while, then you have an assistant right under you to take that job right after you. Unfortunately, we see a little bit less of that, but
I love it though. I think it's
yeah.
great. I'm excited to see how Kate Pay takes over.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Elias, do you have any comments on a coaching carousel?
Mine is more of a prediction for the future, and I guess sort of a question to pose to you guys. If LSU doesn't perform this year, where does Kim Mulkey stand?
What does not perform mean? Like how bad
let's
are we
say
talking?
First round of the tournament.
Let's say they miss the tournament,
If they
because
miss,
I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities for this LSU team this year.
Miss the tournament, she's gone.
yeah,
You think so?
yeah.
I think just because
the climate.
it's a little bit of a liability if you're really thinking about it.
And we've got to remember it sort of died down a little bit, but remember this article that was released regarding some of Kim Mulkey's character, maybe some issues that she's had with players in the past, and we're not going to speculate on the veracity of any of that, but there's this sort of volatile nature of Kim Mulkey that's sort of been in the spotlight the last couple of years with Angel Reese being on her team. Obviously, you're going to draw a lot of eyes on your program, and you're losing arguably your best player in Angel Reese. You're losing. Couldn't hold on to Haley Van Lith in the portal, and we'll talk about her a little bit more later. But what happens with Kim Mulkey?
I mean, realistically, they're going to make the tournament. They're going to be a top 5 seed at a minimum. But if they don't, then I think she's gone. But realistically, let's say they lose in the round of 32 or the first round of the tournament as like a 4 seed or a 5 seed, then I think there's a discussion. And I don't think she's completely safe compared to some other coaches. I think like outside of like Don Staley, Terry Morton, and a few other names.
Yeah, but you guys have to remember she did win a national championship just 2 years.
I did forget about that.
Yeah,
I try to forget about that
national
moment.
championship.
So I really don't like Kim Mulkey.
They're going to be a good team too.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to miss the tournament. I would put a mortgage on that if I could.
So 2 years ago, you had UNC missing the tournament then?
No, but
all right.
LSU's one of the top 10 teams going into next year, I would say.
Yeah, so North Carolina was a preseason AP number 1 and missed the tournament.
It's a different game.
It's a different game.
All right, transfer portal, our favorite. Let's get into it.
Why is that our favorite?
Because it's cool. It's like I call this. It's like its own NBA offseason.
It's just we had never talked as a group about how that was our favorite.
Well,
maybe my favorite's shot clock.
Is it? Okay, that is your favorite. I know that, but I just like talking about the transfer.
I like the transfer
as a topic, not as
well.
A
you should have
segment.
said, "Here's one of my favorite topics."
Here's one of my favorite topics is the transfer portal, which we are about to get into right now. And Elias is just a Debbie Downer about everything, and he hates on me.
What you got, Elias?
Yeah, go ahead.
Haley Van Lith.
That's fair.
After leaving Louisville, seemingly ring chasing, going to LSU, I thought she was going to be one of the more exciting players in the country, and she disappeared for a big portion of the regular season. But I do like Haley Van Lith's game. I think it's really exciting to watch her play when she's really humming, and I think she's going to be one of the more coveted prospects in this portal season. And I just hope that she finds a home where she can really make a name for herself, because she's somebody who can really affect winning in Power 5.
Yeah, I think she took a visit to Mississippi State, who's had, of course, some history in the past few years. Kind of took a backseat the last few years, but yeah, I think that's a good fit for her. I would assume that she's taking more visits, but
sure,
we'll see about that. I have one that's a pretty good one, and I think is my number 1 portal prospect, Kiki Iriafen from Stanford. She's at the top, in my opinion. She averaged 19 and 11 and 2 assists added onto that per game. I think she immediately becomes the most desired player in the portal, no question. I believe the Oregon State transfer, Luke, that you were talking about.
Megan Beers?
Yes, I believe she's already committed to Kentucky, is what I heard about that.
I think you're right.
In that case, Iriafen is definitely the number 1 on the board. I will say this, and it's kind of more of like a speculative thing, but Tara Vanderveer just retired, of course. If returning to Stanford wasn't an option, which is definitely is with the assistant coming back, and Iriafen was still like kind of in contact with Tara, maybe a close relationship with that.
Well, I'm sure she is.
What school, if it wasn't Stanford, do you think Tara would give props to?
Ooh.
Indiana,
Yeah.
because there's history there.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. There's obviously a positional need with Mackenzie Holmes going. I think
They do.
I
need
think that's my best
a
fit.
front court player.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my best fit. But Luke, you got one. What do you got?
I got a freshman, Talia Scott. She was at Arkansas, former Razorback, now a Tiger at Auburn. She's a great scorer, 22 a game in her freshman year. Needs to work on her 3-point shooting, but she's exciting to me. Not one of the top players, I would say, in the portal, but certainly a quality add for the Tigers. I'm excited to see her grow because she's got 3 years left to play. And I think for Auburn, it brings a lot of promise because she's someone who can get buckets. As simple as that.
Yeah, and Auburn, as you said, was one of those programs with a lot of hype and excitement around it, and definitely crowd support, I think, was the segment that I was in.
Yep.
So that's a great environment for her to go to. So now we move into our second to last segment, which is we've kind of been doing it here and there, but I hope it gets more consistent because this is mine. Unfortunately, I won't be participating because I'm the host. So you guys get to guess. So it is
Me versus
guess
Elias.
the call.
Let's go.
Guess the call segment. We got Jack ready to cue one up. And remember, this can be men's or women's. So just remember that. Just it's not necessarily tied to the women's Wednesday or men's Monday. Jack, go ahead and hit it.
Gordy to Black. The time, 18. Shot. 14 seconds. Look for Sleepy Floyd. Look. Oh, he threw it to the wrong man. He threw it to Worthy. It's over. It's over. He's fouled by Eric Smith.
You guys got any idea? Anything off the rip?
No.
All right.
What's
Well, I'll
the
give you
first
a hint.
hint? What's the first hint?
The call comes from a tournament game from the early 1980s.
Yeah, I
Buzz.
could tell it was old.
Buzz.
You got it?
That was Michael Jordan making the national championship game winner as a freshman in 82.
Dang.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Crazy.
Thank you. You put the answer in our shared document.
You're a cheater. You're not
I
supposed to
scrolled
tell
down the
that.
shot clock.
You're not supposed to say that. You gotta
You
act
gotta
like
own
you
it.
knew.
I wasn't gonna.
Elias cheated, everyone.
Yeah,
Don't
I
listen
did.
to anything that
I did.
Yeah,
That's what you get.
Hey,
That's for you.
If you cheat well enough to win, you deserve the win.
Unless you say you
Bill
cheated
Belichick
afterwards.
said that,
Wait
actually.
a minute. That's a terrible thing to say on a sports podcast. You're getting
Dude,
a lot
Bill
of young
Belichick
people
made a
ideas.
career out of it.
All right.
A career. I didn't deflate any footballs. No.
You're
Didn't
just saying that 'cause
spy.
you're wearing a Colts jersey.
Kind of did.
All right. Well, our final segment of the day, and apparently Elias's favorite, is
Make him go
the
first
shot
again.
clock. Yeah,
I
wanna
always
make you
go last. No.
No, this is your punishment for cheating. You have to go first.
No.
Yeah.
We will sit here
All right,
in
fine,
silence before
fine,
I will go
fine,
first. in the
fine.
shot clock.
Luke, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm switching mine up because I want to attack Elias a little bit here. Indiana's not okay. Well, yeah, get the
Yeah, you
timer
can't-
going. Get the
you can't go
timer
yet.
going.
He's
Get the
ready.
timer going.
He's
I'm
ready.
ready.
That's fun.
Indiana is not one of the best teams in women's basketball in the Big Ten next year. I don't even know if they're top 4. Nebraska is better, Illinois is better, USC is better, and Ohio State's better. Boom, simple as that. All of those teams are better. Maybe if they get Kiki Irahafen, it'll change, but Indiana has work to do to be one of the better teams in women's basketball next year in the Big Ten. And I think USC is a clear favorite for me. I don't think it's close. That's all I have to say. I think obviously the bias of going here, you have Indiana way ahead.
Some
Spam
things
soundboard.
that also aren't close. You to 30 seconds.
That I can't say I agree with that, Luke.
Well, that's
I
the
think
truth.
they have the position to land not just one, but two really high quality
once they do
transfers.
once they do that, then they'll jump up.
Shesky from Penn State is highly favored to go to Indiana. She will easily take Sarah Scalia's shooting numbers and produce that next year if she's an Indiana Hoosier. They have Lily Meister, who I know is not one that pads the stats a lot, but
Solid.
she is solid. And you have Faith Wiseman, who I've seen play high school basketball. She stands like a foot taller than everyone else. Whenever she's played, she's 6'4".
Owen is mad.
I'm not mad.
Owen
I'm
is mad.
confused. I'm confused.
Ohio State, Nebraska, and USC and Illinois, as of right now, are better than Indiana looking at next year.
If you switch Nebraska and Indiana, I will believe you.
No.
Oh, and it's okay.
Well, then-
People can be
Fine.
wrong.
Nebraska's
Yeah,
going to be
people
good,
can be
man.
wrong.
People are allowed to
Nebraska's
be
going to
wrong.
be
People are allowed
good.
to
They
be
got
wrong.
they got some recruits.
Jack, I'm ready. I'm
ready.
not going to attack
The
Luke.
Hoosier bias, unreal.
Jeez.
Yes.
Sarah Scalia, why the heck was she not drafted? Is completely disrespectful. Many teams would love to have her as a player. She now goes undrafted with a unfortunate, very low probability to be signed just due to how hard it is to make a WNBA roster. It's absolutely egregious, but she's going to have a great career wherever she goes. Sarah Scalia should have been drafted. Completely bad that she didn't.
Agreed.
Simple enough.
Agreed.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah,
Luke?
I agree with that.
Okay. Glad we
I
can
agree
get
with
on
that.
the same page before we leave this meeting. All right, since Elias has to go last, we'll go ahead and go.
Of course
with
I
him.
do.
Let's just skip it.
Come on now.
Thank you so much. Just kidding.
Well, in response to Luke, I think you're not just when you're picking a team to be the best in a conference, you're not just picking a roster, you're picking a coach. And I think it's crazy to say that Indiana's not going to have a shot at winning the Big Ten when Terry Morin
At 15.
is one of the best, not just in women's
10.
basketball, not just in college basketball. Terry Morin is one of the best basketball minds in the
5.
sport right now. I have a really hard time betting against Terry Morin.
Elias has made, I think, his past 3 or 4 shot clocks,
Yep.
which I am very, very proud of.
Yep.
Good job,
I'm
Elias.
sorry,
Good.
but USC, heavy favorite.
USC may be the favorite roster-wise, but you're not going to
They're
tell
gonna
me
coach.
that Terry Morin can't outcoach just about anybody in college basketball.
No, she can for sure. I
assistants.
certainly think Indiana's still going to be good, but I think as of right now, they're not top 3 for sure.
What
Would you
was
put him in
it-
top 5?
Yeah, they're 5th.
What was it that
Fifth?
kept
Yeah.
Indiana in the game against South Carolina in the Sweet 16?
The coaching.
Coach.
Okay. So if you think Indiana, on the back of Terry Morin, can compete with a generational basketball
the
team
game?
in South Carolina,
Did they win the game?
they competed with them down the stretch.
Did
I
they
mean,
win the
there's
game?
one,
All right, you guys can argue about
one
this off
loose
camera
ball goes
because
the other
we
way,
have
and
to
Indiana
wrap.
State hangs a banner in your face.
We have to wrap up our edition of Flop Warning. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you all. Everyone, again, be safe if you're on campus because of Little 5 weekend. Make good choices. And we will see you guys next Monday on our Men's Monday
Put the helmet
edition
back on.
podcast.
Put the helmet
Thank you
back
so
on.
much.
Put the helmet